Something wild is happening in AI right now, and I don't think most people realize how big this is. In the last 90 days, over 1.5 million people have publicly committed to deleting ChatGPT. Claude, on the other hand, just hit number one in the App Store, going from number 42 to number one in a single month. And Anthropic, the company behind Claude, just crossed $14 billion in annualized revenue. Meanwhile, ChatGPT's market share has dropped from 60% to under 45%, and their web traffic fell 6.5% last month, while Claude's grew 43%. This isn't about one chatbot being better than the other. Something deeper is going on, and today I'm going to break down the four big reasons, the four layers of this story, that explain why millions of people are switching, what ChatGPT got wrong, and most importantly, what this means for you if you're trying to pick the right AI tools for your work or your business. So let me set the stage real quick. For the last 2 years, ChatGPT has been the default. When someone said AI, they meant ChatGPT. 800 million weekly users. The biggest tech launch in history, OpenAI was the brand. And that dominance made sense because they were first, they were good, and they had momentum. But starting in late 2025 and accelerating into 2026, something shifted. And it wasn't just one thing, it was a stack of things, one on top of the other, that created this moment where a huge chunk of users looked around and said, wait, why am I still using ChatGPT? Claude now has 11.3 million daily active users on mobile alone. That's up 183% since the start of this year. They're pulling in 149,000 US downloads per day versus ChatGPT's 124,000. And the stat that really should make every business person pay attention is that 70% of the Fortune 100 is now using Claude. So what happened? Why did the most dominant AI product in the world start losing ground to a company that most people hadn't even heard of 18 months ago? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's not just that Claude is better or ChatGPT got worse. It's that trust is now the battleground in AI, and I think most people don't realize that the AI tool you choose is becoming one of the most important decisions that you'll be making this year. Now, let me walk you through why. I'm going to take you through 4 angles you need to understand: product, ethics, business model, and culture. By the end, you'll know how to evaluate not just Claude and ChatGPT, but any AI tool that you are considering. So let's start with the product itself, because before we get into all the drama and the politics, we need to be honest. Claude shipped some seriously impressive stuff. In February of 2026, Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.6 with a 1 million context window. For those of you who aren't deep in the technical weeds, that means you can feed Claude an entire book, or honestly, several books, and it will actually understand and reference all of it in one conversation. Now, that's a game changer for anyone working with long documents, legal contracts, research papers, code bases, anything that's real business stuff. But the product that really broke things open was Claude Code. Claude Code is now pulling in $2.5 billion in annualized revenue on its own. Let me say that again. A single product feature, a coding assistant, is generating $2.5 billion a year, and it hit $1 billion ARR by November of 2025, which was actually faster than ChatGPT's initial revenue ramp. And the developers love it. A joint study from UC San Diego and Cornell found that 58% of professional developers are now using Claude Code. 4% of all public commits on GitHub, which is every piece of code pushed to the world's biggest code platform, are authored by Claude Code. And Anthropic projects that that'll be over 20% by the end of the year. And the crazy thing is that Anthropic's own engineers are using Claude Code for 70 to 90% of their own coding. Boris Cherny, who heads up Claude Code, has talked publicly about how he went from writing 5% of his own code with AI to 30% to now 100%. The company is eating its own cooking. So now I can hear you thinking to yourself, Hank, I'm not a developer. I don't write code. Why should I care? Well, when the best developers in the world switch tools, it creates a ripple effect. The apps you use, the software your business runs on, the integration your team depends on, all of that is built by developers. And those developers are increasingly choosing Claude. That matters for the ecosystem you operate in. But there's something even more relevant. In January 2026, Anthropic launched Claude Cowork, which extends AI agent capabilities to all knowledge workers, not just coders. We're talking about AI that can handle your complex multi-step tasks across your business tools. Now, that launch was so significant, it triggered roughly $2 trillion in sell-offs across global SaaS stocks. The market looked at Cowork and said, hey, a lot of the software we're paying for might just get replaced by an AI agent anyways. So what does this mean for you if you're a business owner or a team lead? Well, it means the product gap is genuinely real. Claude isn't just catching up. In several categories, it's pulling ahead. On the SWE bench coding benchmark, Claude scores roughly around 80.8% versus GPT 5.3 codex at roughly 80. Now, developers are reporting better instruction following, longer context maintenance, and fewer hallucinations. Look, ChatGPT is still a great product. I want to be honest about that. 800 million weekly users aren't just using a bad tool, but the gap has closed, and in some areas, it's flipped. The product advantage that kept people locked in is not there anymore. Product quality alone doesn't explain 1.5 million people publicly pledging to delete an app. Something else is going on, and that brings us to the next piece of this puzzle, which is ethics. On February 27th, 2026, the AI industry had its defining moment, and most people still don't fully understand what happened. The Pentagon approached Anthropic, Claude, and demanded unrestrained military access to Claude. Not, we want to use it for logistics or help us process paperwork, unrestricted access. And Dario Amodei, Anthropic CEO, said no. He drew specific red lines: no mass surveillance and no autonomous weapon systems without human oversight. The Pentagon's response was, hey, let's label Anthropic a supply chain risk, and then the Trump administration ordered federal agencies to stop using Anthropic products. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. On the same day, Sam Altman announced that OpenAI would take the Pentagon deal that Anthropic refused. The public reaction was massive. The QuitGPT movement exploded overnight. Over 1.5 million users committed to switching. 700,000 people pledged to cancel their ChatGPT subscriptions. The cancel ChatGPT was trending on Reddit and X for days. And it wasn't just the Pentagon deal in isolation. People had been building up frustration, and this was just the moment it all crystallized. There was also the fact that Greg Brockman, OpenAI's co-founder, had donated $25 million to a pro-Trump super PAC. So you had this perfect storm of political and ethical concerns all hitting at once. And then the ads that changed everything. But let me rewind a bit, because the Pentagon deal didn't happen in a vacuum. The trust erosion started months earlier with something that seemed small but was actually a huge deal, and that's ads. In December of 2025, paid ChatGPT users, people that are paying $200 a month for the Pro plan, started seeing what looked like product recommendations in their conversations. You'd ask a technical question about BitLocker encryption, and ChatGPT would suggest you check out Target for shopping deals. You'd be in the middle of a work conversation, and it would recommend the Peloton app. OpenAI's chief research officer, Mark Chen, admitted that they fell short and that anything that feels like an ad needs to be handled with care. But then in 2026 of February, they went ahead and officially launched ads anyway. $60 CPMs, $200,000 minimum buy-in for advertisers, and ads in the free and $8 a month tiers. And this got people talking. Zoe Hitzig, a researcher at OpenAI, actually resigned over the ad strategy, and the reason was chilling. She called ChatGPT's data, and I'm quoting her here, the most detailed record of private human thought ever assembled. And she warned about the manipulation potential of advertising built on top of that data. Think about that for a second. This isn't like ads on Google where they're reading your search queries. This is a tool that people use to brainstorm business ideas, process personal problems, draft sensitive communications, and now there's an advertising layer sitting on top of that. Now remember, Sam Altman himself previously called ads a last resort. Then they did it anyway. Anthropic saw this opening and they took a huge swing. So during the Super Bowl, they ran these satirical ads, spots called deception, betrayal, treachery, and violation. They showed people using AI that would then pivot mid-answer into product pitches. These were dead behind the eyes people getting sold to while trying to have a real conversation. The tagline was that ads are coming to AI, but not to Claude. And the results were immediate. 6.5% increase in site visits, 11% boost in daily active users, and Claude broke into the App Store top 10 overnight. Scott Galloway, the NYU professor and marketing analyst, called it a seminal moment in the AI wars. Sam Altman responded by calling the ads funny, but clearly dishonest. And there's a fair counter-argument there, because some folks pointed out that Anthropic serves as an expensive product to wealthier users. That's a legitimate critique, but the cultural damage to ChatGPT was already done. So what does this mean for you if you're making decisions about AI tools in your business? Well, here's what I'd say. When you're choosing an AI tool for your business, you're not just picking a feature set. You're picking a partner that has access to your company's data, your team's ideas, your strategic conversations, and the question that you need to ask yourself is, well, what is this company's incentive structure? If the tool is funded by ads, the incentive is to keep you engaged and show you things that advertisers want you to see. If the tool is funded by enterprise subscriptions, the incentive is to make you as productive as possible so you keep paying. These are very different incentive structures, and they lead to very different products over time. Anthropic has been clear. No ads are coming to Claude, ever. They use constitutional AI, a set of human-written ethical principles that the model checks itself against continuously. And they're structured as a public benefit corporation from day one. Now, is that enough to guarantee they'll always do the right thing? No, of course not. But it's a structural difference that matters when you're trusting a tool with your business's most sensitive thinking. Now we're moving to the next layer, and this is one that a lot of people skip, and I think it's actually the most important one. Because the ethics stuffs, the Pentagon deal, the ads, no, these are symptoms. The business model is the disease or the cure, depending on which company you're looking at. So let's talk about OpenAI's money situation, because it's a little bit complicated. OpenAI started in 2015 as a nonprofit. The whole pitch was that we're going to be building artificial general intelligence for the benefit of humanity. And Elon Musk donated $44 million based on that premise. Then in 2019, they created this capped profit structure. Investors could make up to 100 times their money, later reduced to single digits. Okay, no, not exactly nonprofit vibes, but at least there was a cap. Then the real money showed up. In 2024, a $6.6 billion funding round came with a demand, restructured to full for profit. SoftBank put in $40 billion, with half of that conditional on lifting the profit cap entirely. Now, the backlash here was enormous. Elon Musk sued, the California and Delaware attorneys generals got involved, and Nobel laureates signed a protest letter. And here's a detail that doesn't get talked about enough. OpenAI actually subpoenaed 7 advocacy groups that opposed the restructuring. Think about that. A company that started as a nonprofit, dedicated to benefiting humanity, was using legal force to silence organizations that wanted it to stay true to its original mission. They eventually settled on a public benefit corporation structured in May 2025, with the nonprofit retaining some control. By October of 2025, the ownership split was roughly nonprofit 26% to Microsoft's 27%, and investors and employees making up around 47%. But one of the details that quietly made headlines in 2026 was that someone noticed that OpenAI had removed the word safely from its mission statement. The new version just dropped the word safely. Now, maybe that's just a branding tweak. Maybe it means nothing. But when your company has gone through a nonprofit to profit conversation drama and people are already questioning your motives, removing the word safely from your mission statement is, to put it lightly, a choice. And then there's the money burn. OpenAI is projected to burn through $17 billion in cash in 2026. Now, that is an extraordinary number. And when you're burning that kind of cash, the pressure to monetize gets intense. That pressure is what led to ads, and that pressure is what led to taking the Pentagon deal. And that pressure is what drives every single one of their decisions. Contrast that with Anthropic. $14 billion in annualized revenue, growing at 10x annually for 3 years. Enterprise revenue that reportedly surpassed OpenAI's by the first half of 2025, despite having a fraction of the consumer users, and a $380 billion valuation as of their February 2026 Series G. Now, another stat that'll blow your mind about ChatGPT is that only 5% of their 800 million users are actually paying. That means that 95% of their massive user base generates cost without generating revenue. That's why they need ads, and that's why they need the Pentagon deals. The business model demands it. Then Anthropic went the other direction. Enterprise first, SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, zero data retention options. Now, they don't train on enterprise data. Now, it's less flashy, but it's a business model that doesn't require compromising user trust to stay alive. With that being said, let's look at what's happening in enterprise adoption. Anthropic went from 18% enterprise AI assistant market share in 2024 to 29% in 2025, a 61% year-over-year increase. Now, 70% of Fortune 100 companies are now using Claude. And let's think about why. If you're a CISO or a CTO at a Fortune 500 company and you're evaluating AI tools, what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at data handling policies, you're looking at whether the tool trains on your data, you're looking at compliance certifications, and you're looking at the company's incentive structure. Well, when one provider says, hey, we'll never put ads in our product and we don't train on your data, and then the other says, we just launched ads and we're doing deals with the Pentagon, that's not a very hard decision for an enterprise buyer. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're running a business and you're choosing between AI providers, follow the money. Look at how they make their revenue. Look at what pressures they're under, because those pressures will inevitably shape the product that you're using. This last layer might be the most interesting one because what's happening with Claude versus ChatGPT isn't just a product competition anymore. It's becoming a cultural identity. So think about the QuitGPT movement. 1.5 million people didn't just quietly switch apps, they publicly committed to it. They made it part of their identity. Hey, I'm a Claude user started meaning something more beyond I prefer this chatbot. It started meaning I care about AI ethics and I'm making a conscious choice about which future I'm supporting. Now, that's not a feature comparison, that's a brand movement and it's incredibly powerful. Then the Super Bowl ads cemented it. Anthropic spent millions to say essentially, hey, we're the ones who won't sell you out, and it worked. Not just because the ads were clever, but because there was substance behind the claim. The Pentagon refusal had happened. The no ads commitment was real, and the PBC structure was already in place. And while all of this external drama was playing out, ChatGPT users were dealing with a product that increasingly felt like it was working against them. The free tier was getting progressively degraded, fewer messages per day, restricted models, constant upgrade prompts, and the pricing structure became genuinely confusing. Free, go at $8, plus a 20, pro at 200, then business, enterprise, and education tiers. Users started reporting what they called lazy responses as well, where the AI seemingly put less effort in as if it were throttling quality to be able to push upgrades later. Now, I do want to be fair, because some of this is perception. Some of it is the natural result of trying to serve 800 million users. And ChatGPT is still an incredibly capable tool. I use it on a daily basis. I'm not here to tell you it's garbage, because it's not. But when you stack the experience degradation on top of the ads, on top of the Pentagon deal, on top of the mission statement change, and on top of the profit conversation drama, you get a user base that's primed to leave. All they needed was somewhere to go, and Claude was right. And India is now Claude's second largest market globally, and nearly half of all Indian Claude usage involves building applications and shipping production software. And Anthropic improved training data for 10 Indian languages. Now, this matters because it shows that the growth isn't just an American political phenomenon. It's not just people angry about the Pentagon deal. Developers and professionals worldwide are choosing Claude based on the product itself. The cultural and political factors accelerated the shift in the US, but the underlying product quality is driving adoption globally. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you the other side of this. First, ChatGPT still has massive advantages. 800 million weekly users is an enormous moat. Network effects are real, and the ecosystems of plugins, integrations, and third-party tools built on top of ChatGPT is vast. Switching costs are real as well for businesses that have built workflows around it. Second, Anthropic isn't perfect. They are a company. They have investors. They need to make money. The "we'll never run ads" commitment is great for now, but it's easy to say when you're growing at 10x annually. So what happens if that growth slows? Well, we don't know. Third, the quality gap is narrower than the internet discourse suggests. For most everyday business tasks like drafting emails, summarizing documents, brainstorming ideas, both tools are excellent. The differences show up more at the edges, like complex coding, very long documents, or nuanced instruction. And fourth, some of the QuitGPT movement is performative. People publicly declaring they're switching doesn't mean all of them actually did. Social media movements and actual user behavior don't always align. And I think that intellectual honesty requires acknowledging all of that. The story isn't just ChatGPT bad, Claude good. It's more nuanced than that. But the trend lines are real, and the structural differences are real, and the trust gap is widening. So we've covered 4 dimensions of the story, and here's the key insight. Each one builds on the others, and they are connected. First, we have the product. Can this tool actually do what I need it to do? Is it good enough? Both Claude and ChatGPT clear this bar, but Claude is pulled ahead in key areas like coding, long documents, and enterprise features. Second is the ethics. Does this company make decisions that I can respect? The Pentagon refusal, the no ads commitment, constitutional AI, these aren't just nice to haves. They're signals about what the company will do when it faces hard choices in the future. Third is the business model. How does this company make money, and what does that incentivize? Enterprise subscriptions incentivize making you productive. Ads incentivize keeping you engaged and showing you things advertisers are paying for. These are fundamentally different. Fourth is the culture. What does it mean to use this tool? Product I'm proud to be associated with? Now, that sounds soft, but it matters, especially for businesses where your tech stack is visible to clients and partners. The reason Claude is winning right now isn't because of any single one of these things. It's because they're winning on all 4 simultaneously. The product is excellent, the ethical stance is clear, the business model is sustainable without compromising users, and the cultural identity is resonating. Now, ChatGPT can recover. They absolutely can. But they need to address all 4 dimensions, not just a better model. Because the competition has shifted from whose AI is smarter to whose AI do I trust with my business. The AI you choose is becoming one of the most important decisions you will make for your business. Not just because the features are different day to day, but because the companies behind these tools are making very different bets about what AI should be, who it should serve, and what lines they're willing to cross. Pay attention to those bets. They'll shape the tools you use for years to come. If this helped you think about the AI landscape differently, hit subscribe. I'm putting out deep dives like this every single week, breaking down what's actually happening in AI in a way that makes sense for your work and your business. I'll see you in the next one.